What's up, guys? Well, it's been a while since I've made a video. I've been very busy with some personal issues and just life in general. But we are here today, and today I want to talk about Debian 12. Now, I haven't had time to look at all of the different desktop environments. I'm primarily a KDE user, so that's what we're going to be looking at today, Debian 12 KDE. Now, some of the branding here you'll notice is a little bit different. That's because I'm currently working into integrating Debian 12 with Titan Linux. So you'll notice some changes there, but at this point we're just talking about branding and artwork, so everything I discuss in this video will still apply to Debian 12. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. I did make a list here because I can't always remember everything that I want to talk about. So let's get into it. Overall, Debian 12 KDE is a pretty good release. We have close to the latest version of KDE. The latest version of KDE is 5.27.6 at the time of this recording. Here we have 5.27.5. We do have the latest LTS kernel, and a few other changes that we'll get into in a little bit. But first, let's talk about the issues, because these are the important things that will probably matter to most people. So, one thing that's always bothered me about Debian is when you go from one release to the next, a lot of times they drop packages from the repositories. I had a problem back when Debian 8 became Debian 9. I couldn't even use Debian 9 because a whole bunch of packages that I used every day were dropped from the servers. This is when I started using Manjaro. But we're having a similar thing happen here with Debian 12. Only a few of the packages that I use were affected. Not a deal breaker, but it is still a minor annoyance. According to the official sources, over 9,519 packages were removed from the repos for Debian 12. A lot of these were outdated packages, abandoned by the developers, just unmaintained, stuff like that. A lot of them probably should have gone away from the repos, but there are a few there that people do use, so you may run into that. Now, I could not find a list of all of the packages that were removed, but I can tell you the ones that affected me. Now, the first one I have written down here is VirtualBox. This is not a repository package. This is a third-party package. I just put it in here because it's noteworthy to say that there has not yet been a VirtualBox release for Debian 12. So if you're trying to install VirtualBox on Debian 12, you may run into some issues. There are ways to do it, but you still have to use the repository for VirtualBox for Debian 11, and that could introduce some problems. So if you are a VirtualBox user, I'd say go ahead and wait until VirtualBox officially releases a version for Debian 12. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, the two packages that I ran into that just no longer existed in the repos was the Muon Package Manager and QEMU KVM. Now, the Muon Package Manager is rather annoying because here on KDE, the Synaptic Package Manager will work, but it doesn't honor the themes. It's pretty much the stock Adwaita GTK. You see the buttons aren't being painted properly. It's just hideous on KDE, especially if you're using a dark theme like I am here. So that's kind of a disappointment. I would prefer to use Muon Package Manager on KDE since it's Qt based. This is a Qt system. I don't want to be running this GTK stuff, but you know, this is what we have to work with. It is what it is. Now, up until recently, Synaptic Package Manager also wouldn't run under Wayland. That has been corrected. It will now run under a Wayland session, but you still have these other issues where it just doesn't really integrate that well with KDE. Not a deal breaker, but it is a minor annoyance. The next package is QEMU-KVM. This package was available in Debian 11. Now you can still use QEMU and Vert Manager and all of this stuff, GNOME boxes, it all still works. But this particular package actually helped some callbacks into the host system that helped it perform a little bit better. And I have noticed without this package there, my system bogs down heavily when I'm running Vert Manager or QEMU session. So that is kind of concerning. Now we get into packages that I discovered or things on the system that are either configured differently and no longer work the way they used to, or are straight up broken. So there is a full list of breakages on the official website. Well, I wouldn't say it's a full list because there's some things that I've discovered that aren't on their list, but there is a list of issues here if you want to read it over the entire release notes. It's all there. I'll have a link to this in the description below. The one that stands out to me the most is this one right here. Systemctl kexec doesn't shut down system properly and corrupts mounted file systems. That's a big one. That is a pretty big bug. Severity grave. Yeah, I'd say so. So that's one to keep an eye on. I haven't experienced any issues with this myself. In the bug report, it talks about kernel 6.0.0, and at the time of this recording, Debian is running 6.0.1, so maybe it's been corrected, but I don't see any indication of that in this bug report. So just keep that in mind. There's a whole bunch of other ones in here to be aware of, but none of these really affected me. What I ran into were with certain applications themselves. So KTorrent is broken, and you might say, well, what does that have to do with Debian? That's a KDE application. Well, yes, but because Debian stable kind of locks you in to the version that you have, they really only do bug fixes, like major bug fixes, and security patches, mostly security patches. So the chances are you'll be stuck with this version of KTorrent for the entire release cycle of Debian 12. That's why it's important to know. So you kind of have to treat it like it's all part of the Debian release, even if it's not strictly Debian's fault, because you're probably going to be stuck with it through the life of this release. So what happens with KTorrent is if I go to try to open a torrent, here's a torrent for Linux Mint, open it with KTorrent, KTorrent opens, but where's the torrent? It doesn't give me the dialog to add the torrent into here. So that's kind of annoying, especially if you're adding and downloading more than one at a time. What you have to do is you actually have to click the button that says open, select the torrent from the file manager, and then it comes up. So that is definitely not the way that's supposed to work. So keep that in mind. I have installed the kgit download manager instead. The kgit download manager is capable of downloading torrents. See, here it is right here. If I launch it with kgit, it comes up, I get prompted, it adds it right to the download manager, and there it is. It's downloading the torrent right in the download manager. So now this is not fully featured like KTorrent is, but if you're just downloading the occasional torrent now and then, kgit will work just fine for you. But if you were depending on using something like KTorrent, well, KTorrent seems to be a little broken right now. It doesn't auto add the torrent to the file. Now you can still use KTorrent. I mean, it's still functional. You just don't get that automatic prompt. And I just find that very annoying, so I'm not going to use it. The sources button is now broken, and I'm talking about the sources button inside of the Discover Software Center. You see here we have the list of repos and stuff. Right over here, software sources. You click it, nothing happens. It's broken. The reason why this is broken is because the underlying package has changed. So that package used to be called Software Properties KDE. So normally you would do this, Software Properties KDE, but if we run that, as we can see, that command is not found. The name of the package has changed from Software Properties -KDE to software properties -qt. And now if we run that, it opens just like it's supposed to, and here it is. But because the name of this package had changed, that has not really been updated in Discover in this version, so that button is linking to this instead of this, and that's why it no longer works. Not a big deal, but it is annoying when you have a button that does nothing. Another issue that I ran into is the night color mode for the display. That doesn't work properly. Debian did make a change to one of the underlying packages. The package that manages the system time, it's in here somewhere, it has changed. So it's, yeah, changes to packages that set the system clock. So they changed this package here. The way that they're doing the system clock is now different, and that seems to have caused a problem with the night color for the KDE desktop. So if we go down here, go to night color, if it is set for this one, sunset and sunrise at current location, it automatically enables itself at the wrong time. It's still using GMT Central Time. But if you come down here and do manual location right here, then it works like it's supposed to. Just something to keep in mind. Again, not a major issue, minor annoyance, but it is there. The next one I put in here because it bothers the hell out of me. Inconsistent installations. And I'm specifically talking about codecs and hardware acceleration. On my laptop, I installed KDE 12, Debian 12 KDE, and when I went to play a video in VLC, it was horrible. It didn't have the method for hardware acceleration in the video was broken. I had to disable hardware acceleration in the media player in order to get the video to play correctly. I install it for a second time on the laptop after experimenting around and breaking something. I did a full reinstall, and the second time around it worked perfectly fine. It wasn't broken anymore. And I was kind of curious about that because me and my wife have the same identical laptop. I purchased them both at the same time. And hers didn't have the problem and mine did. So there is an inconsistency between installations. I also noticed that on my main PC here that the base package set that I received on one install versus another, I had a different number of packages from one install to another. So that's kind of weird. I haven't really noticed any major fallout from that. Everything seems to be working just fine here, but that is kind of strange, and it's something to keep an eye on, I guess. The next thing that I noticed was GameMode. Now, if you are not familiar with Feral GameMode for Linux, it's basically this background utility that when you launch a game, if you have GameMode enabled, it will do a couple of things to your system to increase the performance of that game. It will turn off your CPU governors, it'll give you I/O priority, process niceness, I don't know what that means. It changes your kernel scheduler, it inhibits your screensaver. If you have compatible hardware, it'll actually overclock your video card up to its safe level. And you can also generate custom scripts to run things at game launch. So this has been around for a while. Not everybody knows about it though, but it is something that I use. And in Debian 11, it was very easy to make this work. I'll do it in terminal just so you can see. So we have a game on here called K-Patience. It's Solitaire. It'll work with any of these games, but I'm just going to use Solitaire because it doesn't have sound and I don't want to blow out the speakers while I'm trying to record a video. So normally the way you would do game mode is you would just launch the application. So like let's say that the normal application launch was this, KPAT for K-Patience. There it is, it launched. If we wanted to do launch it under game mode, we would just go game mode run, all one word, kpad, like that. And it would launch it again, but with game mode enabled. You can see down here in the system tray, our game mode process indicator is there, meaning game mode is running. So there you go. In Debian 11, to get this to work as a regular menu entry, what you would do is you would just come down here and right click on your kickoff menu, go to edit applications. You would go to the item, in this case KPatience, and what you would do is right here where it says program, that's the launch command for the program, you would just do the same thing we just did in terminal, game mode run, and save it. And that's it. And you would do that for each item that you would want game mode to launch in. In Debian 11, with the version of KDE that was in Debian 11, that worked. You would just come in here and launch it, and it would work. If you do it here, though, in this version of Debian with this version of KDE, you just get an error. It doesn't work the same way it does in the terminal. So what you actually have to do is you actually have to replace the game launch command here with game mode run, and then under command line arguments in front of whatever string is here, that's where you put the launch command for the application. Like that. Kind of weird, but that's how you have to do it in this version. It took me a while to figure that out. I was trying to get game mode to work. I kind of gave up on it for a while, and I figured out that, oh, well, if we do it this way, it works. So now if we come back and launch the same game again, it launches, and we have our game mode indicator right here telling us that it is running with game mode active. So that's kind of weird, but that's what you have to do. Now, I wouldn't call that a bug or something that's broken, like I have it written in the notes here, but it is something that did change, that did throw me for a bit of a loop, and it took me a while to figure it out. So, now with all that out of the way, let's talk about the improvements. We have a new SDDM theme in the previous version of Debian 11 with KDE. The default login screen was absolutely hideous. We have a nice breeze one in here now that looks a lot better than the one before. Dark theme actually works. Well, I wouldn't say it's 100% because you saw me open Synaptic earlier and it didn't honor the theme. But in Debian 11, certain applications, like the video downloader utility, which is a Flatpak, this would not honor the dark theme. It is now. Other applications like case system log and things of this nature, they wouldn't honor the dark theme. And they do now, as you could see. So I'd say where the dark theme was 60% working in Debian 11 KDE, it's about 90% working in this release. So that's good. You could actually use a dark theme now. Non-free codecs and firmware are included in the installer. That is probably something most of you are already aware of with Debian 12. And this is a welcome improvement for me. I understand the desire to have a full Libre, fully FOSS system. I get it, but you got to have your hardware working. I mean, there's certain things that you have to have just to make your system function. And with the previous version of Debian 11, I needed some of those to get my system installed. I had to run a non-free component to get my network card working, as well as my graphics card. And of course, when you're doing a Debian net install, you kind of need the network card for it to function. So what I had to do is I demonstrated this in a past video where I would run the Debian net installer and then have a USB stick with the firmware on it, and then the installer would grab the information from that and it would continue from that point forward. So in this version of Debian 12, it just works right out of the box. Any non-free firmware that you need, it sees it, it adds it, and you're good to go. You still might want to add a couple of components to your system to get everything fully functional. Stuff like some of the non-free kernel headers and that sort of thing. Like this stuff here, like the Linux headers, DKMS. You may want to install some of that because some programs might require it. Like some of these file system format types that I have in here, it does need this package to work. So, some of these do. So you may want to add that, but for the most part, pretty much everything you have on your system will run right out of the box, and that'll be just fine for most people. So that's a welcome improvement. So at the time of this recording, it ships with the latest LTS kernel, 6.1.0. That's pretty good for a stable Debian release. We also have almost the latest version of KDE. At the time of this recording, the latest stable version of KDE is 5.27.6. We have 5.27.5 here. Pretty good for a Debian stable release. We have Pipewire and Wayland enabled by default. Now, I don't use Wayland on my system because it lags. When I have a Wayland session running, just moving my mouse cursor around the screen and moving windows around, it's really laggy. So I'm using an X session, and I'm not opposed to Wayland, but as long as X11 gives me better performance, that's what I'm going to use. I'm sure eventually that will change, but as for right now, I'm still on the X Windows server. Pipewire is a welcome change. I didn't even notice any difference when I first started running the system. I was unaware of that, and everything worked fine. I didn't notice any difference. So I guess that's working pretty well. And Debian 12 can now detect Windows 11 on a dual boot setup, so you'll be able to dual boot your Windows 11 machines if you want. And they also added new support for ARM devices. So that's all good stuff. So that's really about all I have in my notes here. My overall opinion of Debian 12 KDE is this is a solid release. Yes, I did have some complaints there, but they're kind of nitpicky, they're kind of minor. None of them are real deal breakers, more or less just minor annoyances. But that's what you get sometimes with a Debian release. That's just how they operate, and that's fine. They're focused on stability and longevity, and if the developers feel like that's how they need to accomplish that, then so be it. I really do like this release. This is still my preferred Linux distribution, apart from my own, of course, Titan Linux. But yeah, Debian 12 gets 2 thumbs up for me. However, you do need to be aware of some of the issues that I mentioned, as well as the official list of broken packages, because this could be a deal breaker for some people. I haven't noticed any issues listed here specifically. The only ones that I noticed personally are the ones that I've already mentioned, and that's it. Overall, I'd say that I would give this release an 8 out of 10. Which is pretty good. I think Debian 11 was a 9 out of 10. This one is an 8 out of 10 just because of those few little issues. But overall, it's a good release, and it's one that I could live with, and I give it 2 thumbs up. So thanks for watching this video. Don't forget, we still have a Discord server, and as well as a community website. I'll have a link for all of that stuff down in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.